I don't like to think about that trip anymore. But every time someone asks about camping or brings up plans with friends, it comes back. I can't stop it. I guess I'm writing this down because it won't go away until I do. We were 5 guys, all in our mid-20s. College buddies who had stuck together through everything: jobs, breakups, moving cities. Every summer, we tried to plan one big trip. That year, it was camping. Nothing fancy, just tents, food, a few coolers, and a long weekend away from everything. No phones, no signal, no one else. Just nature. We picked a place up north, past the last stretch of paved roads. A friend had heard about it from someone he worked with. It wasn't an official campground, more like a big flat area near a lake, tucked behind a thick patch of woods. The kind of spot that doesn't show up on maps but locals know about. Supposedly quiet, isolated, and perfect for what we wanted. Drinking, laughing, and pretending we still had no real responsibilities. We left early Friday morning in 2 cars. Mine was loaded with camping gear, coolers, tarps, and firewood. The other car had the rest of the guys and a kayak strapped to the roof. We drove for hours, highways, back roads, then gravel roads that slowly narrowed into trails. We had a set of GPS coordinates and followed them until the road faded into 2 muddy ruts. We parked at the edge of a small clearing and hiked in the rest of the way. It was only about a mile, but hauling all that gear took time. The path was uneven and thick with roots. We passed trees with moss growing up their trunks and crossed a stream with a fallen log as a bridge. No one else was around. No campers, no hikers. Just birds, bugs, and the wind. I remember how the air smelled, damp earth and pine. Clean in a way you only get out there. We found the spot by the lake just like we'd been told. Flat, soft ground. Enough trees around for shade, but still open enough for sunlight. The lake was maybe 100 yards wide, smooth and still, surrounded by forest. No signs of people. No fire pits or garbage. It felt untouched. We set up 2 tents, unpacked the food, got the fire going, and cracked open beers. That first night was everything we wanted. Firelight, the sound of the lake lapping the shore, the sky full of stars, and nothing else. The second day started off normal. We went swimming, grilled burgers, fished a little. One of the guys paddled the kayak around the lake while the rest of us threw rocks at a target on a stump. We didn't do anything exciting, really. That was the whole point. But that night, something felt different. The woods felt too quiet. Not like the peaceful quiet from the day before. This was heavier. We all noticed it in our own way. One of the guys kept checking over his shoulder. Another stood up and scanned the trees while poking at the fire. We didn't talk about it. We didn't want to ruin the mood, but it was there. At one point, I walked down to the lake to rinse off some dishes. I crouched at the edge, scrubbing with sand and water. When I looked up, I thought I saw something on the far side of the lake. Just a shape, low and wide, near the treeline. It didn't move. Could have been a fallen log. I stared at it for a long time before shaking it off. Probably just my eyes adjusting to the dark. I didn't say anything to the others. It didn't seem important. Later that night, we all crashed hard. I shared a tent with 2 of the guys. The other 2 were in the second tent across the clearing. I fell asleep to the sound of one of them snoring and the occasional crackle of the fire burning low outside. Sometime during the night, I woke up. I didn't know why at first. Just snapped awake with a tight feeling in my chest. I lay still, listening. The snoring had stopped. I figured maybe one of them turned over or woke up to pee. I tried to go back to sleep, but then I heard a sound outside the tent. Not the wind or animals. Something slow, like footsteps, but not steady. A crunch, a pause. Another crunch. Then silence. I held my breath, thinking maybe it was one of the guys. Maybe they got up to walk around. But it didn't sound like boots. It was lighter, more careful. Stillness came after. No more steps. No breathing. Nothing. I waited a long time before I eventually drifted off again. When I woke up in the morning, the others were already moving around the campsite, making coffee, joking, acting normal. I felt off, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. We spent most of that day exploring. There were deer trails leading away from the lake, so we followed one uphill. It opened up into a ridge where we could see the whole area. Forest for miles in every direction. No roads, no cabins. Just wilderness. We stayed out for hours, and when we got back to camp, I noticed something that didn't sit right. One of the coolers was open. We'd closed everything tight that morning. I remembered snapping the latches shut myself. But now it was half open, and some of the food was missing. Not scattered like an animal got into it, just gone. No claw marks, no torn packaging. Clean, like someone had just taken it. I looked around the site. Nothing else was touched. Gear was still where we left it. Tents zipped. Chairs still folded. But that cooler, someone opened it. Still, we brushed it off. Maybe we'd forgotten to close it right. Maybe something took it without making a mess. We weren't about to pack up early just because some food disappeared. We still had plenty. That night, we stayed closer to the fire. Everyone was quieter. There were fewer jokes, more glancing over shoulders, more staring into the woods like we expected something to be there. Around midnight, we started to hear noises, real ones this time, snapping branches, movement, not close but not far. The fire cast a wide glow, but past that was darkness, deep black between the trees. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. We all knew. We turned in a little earlier than the night before. I lay awake for a long time, listening. The woods were alive with small sounds, but underneath all of that was something else. A different kind of rhythm, too slow, too deliberate. Not an animal, not wind, like someone was moving through the trees, just out of reach. In the morning, we found tracks, bare footprints pressed deep into the dirt near the fire. Not boots, not shoes, human feet, but not ours. Too wide, too flat. No one we knew walked barefoot out there. They led up from the treeline, circled the fire pit, and went back into the woods. We didn't talk much while packing up. We moved fast. No one said it out loud, but we all felt it. That we weren't alone. That someone had been out there watching us, walking into our camp at night, taking food, circling us while we slept. We made the hike back in silence. The air felt colder, the woods tighter. The trail that seemed harmless 2 days ago now felt like a tunnel we couldn't get out of fast enough. When we got to the cars, we found something else. Deep scratches in the paint on the side of the second vehicle, like someone had dragged a rock or metal along the doors. Long curved lines, deliberate. We drove out without stopping. No one ever reported it. What would we even say? We didn't see anyone. Nothing was taken that we could prove. No one was hurt, but something was there. Someone. I still don't know who. Maybe a squatter. Maybe someone living off the grid. Or maybe someone who just waits out there, deep in the woods, for people like us to show up. None of us has camped since. We don't talk about it when we're together. It's like we all agreed without saying a word that it didn't happen. But I think we all know it did. And I know I'll never go back. Not there. Not anywhere that far from help. Somewhere out there, someone watched us, walked into our camp, took food, stood just outside the firelight while we slept. And if we hadn't left when we did, I think they would have done more. I think they were waiting for us to stay one more night. I had just gotten into Arizona the night before, rolling in late and tired after a long drive from Colorado. The plan was to camp out a few days near Tucson, do some solo hiking, and just unwind for a bit. I'd been stressed from work, and there was something about the desert that always seemed to quiet my head. I picked Sabino Canyon mostly because I'd read about it in a forum. People said the trails were beautiful, and it wasn't too remote but still far enough from the city that you could breathe. I set up camp a little ways off the designated trail. Not illegal or anything, just one of those pull-off sites where you could park and pitch a tent without being bothered. It wasn't too far from the entrance to the canyon, maybe a 15-minute walk from the main trailhead, but you couldn't see the road or other campsites from where I was. That was the appeal. I wanted quiet. First night went fine. I had my little propane stove, some simple food, and a chair set up just outside the tent. The stars were out. It was quiet aside from the occasional breeze or rustling in the bushes. Desert nights get cold, but I had the gear for it. I slept fine. Next morning, I woke up early, even before the sun was fully out. I made coffee and sat out staring across the dry wash bed in front of my camp. The landscape was something else. Huge saguaro cacti, boulders, mesquite trees, the whole thing spread out under that hazy orange sky. The peace of it all made the coffee taste better. I'd brought a paperback and was planning on just reading and lounging, but by mid-morning I got restless. There was a trail nearby that branched off into a less traveled loop, the kind not always marked on maps, but you can see it if you've got a good eye. It was narrow and rocky and didn't look like many people used it anymore, which is why I liked it. I grabbed my water bladder, a granola bar, and my knife, just out of habit, and started off. The sun was already warm, though not yet burning. The desert smells stronger in the morning. You catch little whiffs of creosote and dust, and sometimes something like sage. The trail was easy at first, winding up around some boulders and then following a ridge that gave me a good view of the canyon. I kept going, picking my steps carefully in the loose gravel. I must have been about 2 or 3 miles in when I noticed the trail had flattened out and started heading toward this dry arroyo. The terrain changed a bit, more scrub trees and thorny bushes crowding the path. I slowed down and started looking for a good spot to sit and rest for a while. That's when I saw him. At first, I didn't register what I was looking at. Just a shape, kind of pale and out of place in all that brown and green. He was maybe 40 or 50 yards ahead, coming toward me at a casual pace. I stopped walking, not out of fear but more just confusion. He wasn't carrying a pack or anything. His arms swung loosely at his sides, and I could tell from the way his shoulders and chest moved that he wasn't wearing a shirt. It took a few seconds more to realize he wasn't wearing anything at all. The guy was completely naked. That made me freeze. I wasn't immediately scared, just kind of stunned. Naked people aren't something you expect to see while hiking alone in the desert. He wasn't waving or calling out, wasn't doing anything threatening. Just walking, like it was the most normal thing in the world. He was tall, maybe in his 40s, with a bit of a gut and tan skin. His face looked hard, though. Not angry, but not friendly either. His expression didn't change when he saw me. He just kept walking, like I wasn't even there. I stepped to the side of the trail without saying a word, and he passed me with maybe 10 feet between us. No eye contact, no nod, nothing. He just kept walking down the trail in the direction I'd come from. I turned to watch him go, my heart beating a little faster now. I didn't want to keep walking deeper into the canyon if he was hanging around the area. After a minute, I turned back and kept walking, though more slowly. The feeling of peace I'd had all morning was gone. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting him to double back or something, but he never did. I hiked maybe another half-mile before stopping. I was in a shallow, rocky gully with some decent shade and decided to sit for a bit. My brain was trying to sort out what I'd just seen. Maybe there was some nudist spot nearby? It felt weird, sure, but maybe not dangerous. Still, it didn't sit right with me. Something about the way he looked through me, or didn't look at all, made the hair on my arms stand up. I decided not to go any further. The air felt heavier now, like the heat had thickened. I turned around and started heading back the way I came, hoping I wouldn't see him again. I didn't, but the hike back felt different. Every rustle in the bushes made me jump. I kept scanning the landscape, looking for signs of movement. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but when I stopped, it was silent, just the dry hum of the wind. By the time I got back to camp, it was late afternoon. I hadn't eaten since breakfast and tried to make myself a sandwich, but my stomach wasn't interested. I sat in the camp chair for a while, scanning the trees and brush around me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up, listening. One time, I thought I heard something moving just outside the tent. A crunch of dry gravel. I held my breath and stayed still, clutching my knife. But nothing happened. No sounds. No shadows moving against the tent walls. Just silence. Next morning, I decided I'd had enough. Packed everything up just after sunrise and drove into Tucson. I stopped at a gas station and grabbed coffee and a burrito, then sat in the parking lot trying to make sense of the whole thing. I pulled out my phone and started searching around nudist spots near Sabino Canyon, hiking trails, off-the-grid communities. Turns out, not far from where I'd been hiking, there was a place, an unofficial nudist camp out in the desert. No signage, nothing online except for a few mentions on obscure forums. Locals knew about it, but it wasn't exactly advertised. Apparently some folks hiked naked in that area all the time. Nothing malicious, just their way of living. That explained it, sort of. But the thing is, it didn't make me feel better. Because here's the part one didn't tell anyone. Not even when I mentioned the story later to a friend. After I packed up and started heading out of my camp that morning, I passed by this low shrub line about 50 yards from where I'd pitched the tent. And there, in the dirt under one of the thicker mesquite bushes, I saw a spot where someone had clearly been sitting. You could see the flattened ground, the marks where bare feet had pressed into the sand, even a faint shape like a heel print. It wasn't mine, and it hadn't been there the day before. I don't know if it was him. I don't know if he followed me back or if he'd been watching the whole time. Maybe he was harmless. Maybe he was just curious. Or maybe he was waiting. All I know is I don't camp alone in the desert anymore. And when I hike, I pay more attention to the bushes. Because even if someone's naked and seems like they don't care about you, that doesn't mean they're not watching. And sometimes, the scariest thing out there isn't what someone's doing. It's what they're not doing. Just standing there, waiting, watching, and never saying a word. I decided to go camping alone in late October, which was a little later in the season than I normally would have picked, but I'd been putting it off for weeks. Work had been a mess. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I was tired of screens and noise and traffic, so I just picked a spot I'd saved months earlier. A free, dispersed camping area up in the high desert of northern Nevada. The place wasn't in any guidebooks. I'd found it by accident while scrolling through satellite images on a map app, looking for public land that wasn't too close to anything developed. This one was just a little pull-off down an unmarked dirt road, miles from the highway, surrounded by scrub brush and big flat rocks that turned reddish-orange at sunset. I liked that it wasn't near a campground or trailhead. That usually meant fewer people, or none. Took me about 7 hours to get there from my house. I left early and got to the dirt road by early afternoon. The drive-in was rougher than I remembered. The road had ruts and some loose gravel sections that made my tires slip a bit, but I took it slow. The only sign of life I passed was a rusted-out cattle gate and a sun-bleached fence post. No houses, no cars, no other campers. When I finally reached the spot I'd saved, I parked just off the road and walked around a bit before setting up camp. The air smelled like dry grass and dust. There were faint tire tracks leading away from the road and out into the scrub, but they were old, probably from a ranch truck or someone hunting earlier in the season. I followed them for about 100 yards and didn't see any sign that people came here often. No beer cans, no fire pits, no footprints. That's when I knew I'd picked the right spot. I set up my small one-person tent behind a large flat boulder that would block the wind if it picked up overnight. I rolled out my sleeping pad, got the camp stove going, and made some coffee before unpacking anything else. Felt good to breathe, to just sit and hear nothing but wind through the brush. No voices, no phones, no traffic, just quiet. As the sun started to drop, the land turned gold. The light came in low, stretching shadows across the dirt. I took a walk around the area to stretch my legs and get my bearings before it got dark. I wasn't too worried about wildlife, maybe a coyote or a stray mule deer, but nothing big. I kept my knife on me anyway, just habit. The only thing that stuck out was this small hill about 200 yards north of my tent. It had some dead bushes on top and what looked like the remains of an old fence. Maybe a property marker from back when people tried to ranch this land. I climbed to the top and stood there for a few minutes, looking out. I could see miles in every direction. Empty land, pale dirt, the ribbon of road I'd come in on. No lights, no movement, just open silence. I climbed down before it got too dark to see. Back at camp, I made a small fire with some dry twigs and branches I found nearby, just enough to keep warm and cook some food. I brought a can of chili and a small skillet, so I got that going and watched the sky fade into black. Stars came out hard and fast. With no light pollution, it looked like someone had splattered paint across the sky. I sat by the fire for a long time, just soaking it in. Every now and then I'd hear something move in the brush, but nothing close. Probably a rabbit or something rooting around. The night was colder than I expected, though. Once the fire died, I climbed into my sleeping bag and zipped it up tight. Sometime around midnight, I woke up suddenly. I didn't know why at first. There hadn't been a sound, no movement. I just snapped awake like my brain had flipped a switch. I laid still and listened. Nothing, just the low hum of the wind outside the tent. My heart was beating a little faster than it should have been, though. I sat up slowly and unzipped the sleeping bag partway. The cold hit me fast. I reached for my flashlight and clicked it on, but kept the beam low. I shined it around the inside of the tent, then pointed it toward the fabric wall facing the outside. That's when I noticed something strange. There were faint impressions in the dirt just outside the tent. I couldn't see clearly through the fabric, but the light cast shadows, and there was something about them that looked off, like the ground had been disturbed. Not a full footprint, not deep enough for that, but like something or someone had stepped close and then walked away. I turned off the flashlight and waited, holding my breath. Still nothing. It was probably just me overthinking it. The wind could have moved the dust. An animal could have wandered by. But I didn't sleep much the rest of the night. Next morning, I got up early and stepped outside. The sun was barely over the horizon, and everything had that blue-gray color that fades fast once the light takes over. I walked around the tent and looked down at the ground. There were marks. Not deep, not clear, but definitely there. Little patches where the crust of the dirt had been shifted, like someone dragging their boot lightly across the surface. They led from the direction of that small hill I'd stood on the night before, and they ended about 10 feet from my tent. I followed them back a ways, but they disappeared once the ground got harder near the edge of the brush. Still, it bothered me. It wasn't conclusive, but it didn't sit right either. I didn't remember hearing anything. And why would someone walk all the way out here just to stop 10 feet from my tent and leave? I spent the day hiking further out, partly to distract myself, partly because I wanted to see if there were any other signs of people nearby. I didn't find anything. No trash, no gear, no trails. Just open space and that dry, scratchy wind that never really stops blowing. I came back before sundown, made a fire, and cooked the rest of my food. That night, I kept my boots inside the tent and my knife within reach. It was colder, and the wind had picked up. The tent flapped and shifted more than the night before, making it harder to sleep. I must have dozed off eventually, because when I opened my eyes again, it was full dark and the fire outside had burned out. Then I heard it, a crunch, close, maybe 10 or 15 feet away. I froze. Another crunch, dry dirt shifting under weight. I didn't move, just listened. Whatever it was, it wasn't walking fast. It wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light either. It had weight. It was deliberate, the kind of sound that doesn't come from an animal just passing by. I reached slowly for the knife and gripped it. My breath was shallow. I didn't dare turn on the flashlight. I didn't want to give away that I was awake. The sound stopped, just outside the tent. The air felt thin. I sat there in the dark for what felt like hours, waiting for the next sound. But it never came. Eventually, I heard the wind pick back up, and the normal desert night sounds returned. I didn't sleep again. When the sun rose, I stepped outside with the knife in one hand. The first thing I saw was a small pile of rocks stacked neatly by the edge of the boulder I'd camped behind. 4 or 5 flat stones balanced carefully. They hadn't been there before. No tracks, no footprints, nothing disturbed around it. I took a photo with my phone and packed everything up in 20 minutes. I didn't even eat. I didn't care how far the drive was. I wanted to be gone. Back on the road, I didn't relax until I hit pavement again. I drove into the next town and sat in a gas station parking lot with the engine running, trying to think. I looked up the nearest ranger station and went inside. I told the guy behind the counter what I'd seen, about the sounds, the tracks, the rock pile. He didn't seem surprised. He told me there were sometimes squatters out in that part of the desert. People living off-grid, sometimes paranoid, sometimes not right in the head. He said they'd had a few reports before of people being watched at campsites. Nothing ever escalated, but it wasn't unheard of. He told me not to camp alone out there again. I haven't. That photo's still on my phone. Just a small stack of rocks in the middle of nowhere, balanced too perfectly to be natural. It's the only proof I have that someone was out there with me, watching, close enough to walk right up to my tent. Twice. I think about that second night sometimes. How long he stood there, what he was waiting for, and what might have happened if I'd stepped outside. It had only been a couple of months since I'd started seeing him, and I don't think I'd ever been more anxious about something in my life than I was about this camping trip. The plan was simple. Drive up to the Chiricahua Mountains in southeastern Arizona, meet up with a few of his friends, and spend the weekend out in nature. No big deal, right? Except it felt like a big deal. I wasn't just going to a new place. I was walking straight into a situation that made me feel exposed and out of control. His friends didn't know me. I didn't know them. And to top it all off, both of us had just quit smoking. I'd been smoking for years. It wasn't something I was proud of, but it was the one thing I knew would take the edge off when my nerves got too tight. But now I didn't have it. Neither did he. That car ride felt like a slow, crawling death. I cried halfway there, quiet and tucked into myself in the passenger seat. He kept his focus on the road. I knew he was trying not to snap, and I didn't blame him. We were both stretched thin, our patience barely hanging on. The wind outside pushed against the car as we climbed higher into the mountains. The desert turned to forest, and the road narrowed with each curve. That was when we hit the pothole. I didn't even see it coming. 1 second the road was rough but manageable, and the next we slammed hard into something that felt like a small crater. The entire car jumped with a deep metallic thud, and then the engine died. Just like that, we coasted to a stop on the side of the road, surrounded by silence. He tried the ignition once. Nothing. I could feel the tension in his body before he even looked at me. Neither of us spoke. I just stared out the windshield, the road cutting through dense pine trees, and waited. Eventually, we started flipping through the manual, looking for some kind of answer. Nothing made sense. The dashboard didn't give us a clear warning light, just a few vague symbols neither of us could figure out. Cars passed now and then, and some even stopped to ask if we needed help. We didn't, not really. At least we didn't think so. The strange part was how polite people were, pulling over in that kind of country where the next gas station could be 50 miles away. Most were in trucks, locals maybe, ranchers. A couple of them seemed genuinely concerned. But every time someone asked if we were okay, all I could think to ask was if they had a cigarette. Some laughed, some said no, but I didn't care much for conversation after that. We just waved them off and kept at it. Eventually, after what felt like an hour, he figured it out. Some kind of safety shut-off. The car had registered the impact and just killed everything as a precaution. Once we reset it, everything came back to life. No damage, thankfully, not even to the tires. But my nerves were shot. My body had been in fight-or-flight mode for so long that I felt wrung out, like a towel that had been twisted to the breaking point. We made it to the campsite later than expected. The sun had started to dip low over the trees. His friends were already there, 3 of them, spread out with beers in hand and music humming softly from a speaker. I didn't feel ready to deal with people, not then. We set up the tent near the edge of the site, a little off to one side. It gave me some space, which I appreciated. He greeted his friends, and I just told him I needed to lie down for a bit. The inside of the tent felt like the only safe place in the world. I crawled in, closed the flap, and curled up in the sleeping bag. I didn't sleep right away. My body felt heavy, but my mind was racing. I kept thinking about the pothole, the strangers, the car, the long road still stretching behind us. And I missed the crutch of a cigarette more than anything. The tent was warm with the late afternoon sun still hanging in the sky, and I must have dozed off without realizing it. When I woke up, the light had changed. It was cooler now and dim. A breeze moved gently through the trees, brushing soft noises across the canvas of the tent. I couldn't hear the others anymore. Maybe they were down by the water or off hiking like he had said they might. I didn't know. I didn't care. I stayed still for a while, wrapped in the sleeping bag, staring at the thin fabric above me. Then I heard something. It was a soft thump at first, a slow, dragging sound that made me freeze. Then a heavy step. Another. Something was outside. My first thought was that it was one of the guys coming back, maybe looking for something. But then I noticed how quiet it was. No voices, no crunching gravel or boots, just steps, heavy ones, too heavy. I held my breath and turned my head toward the edge of the tent where the sound had come from. I didn't have my glasses on. I'd left them outside in a small plastic bin I kept near the flap. Everything was a blur. The shadows outside shifted. Then one stopped right in front of the tent. It was huge, not just tall, broad. Massive, really. The shape of it covered most of the tent wall. It didn't move for a while, just stood there, breathing. I could hear it. Deep, slow breaths. I didn't know what to do. I felt paralyzed. My mind jumped to every bear warning I'd ever read, every story, every dumb article online about what to do when faced with a bear. I couldn't remember a single useful thing. All I knew was that if it tore through the tent, I had nowhere to go. I stayed as still as I could, barely breathing. The shape outside shifted again, moving slightly to the side. Then I saw the tail. It swished once, slow and steady. I blinked, trying to clear my eyes. That didn't make sense. Bears didn't have tails like that. Not long ones. Not ones that moved like a pendulum. My heart was racing, but something about it didn't add up. I reached for the flap slowly, still inside the bag, and unzipped just enough to slip my arm through. My fingers groped around the edge of the bin until I found my glasses. I slid them on with shaking hands and peeked out. It wasn't a bear. It was a cow. Just a big, dusty, slow-moving cow standing a couple of feet from the tent. Its brown body shifted lazily as it chewed on something, swatting flies with its long tail. I felt every ounce of tension in my chest break at once. My muscles let go, and I almost laughed out loud, except I didn't. I just stared at it, eyes wide, as this massive animal slowly walked past the tent and disappeared behind the trees. Later, I learned that the area was open range. That meant cows could wander wherever they wanted. There had been bear sightings recently too, so I wasn't completely wrong to panic. But that didn't make the moment feel any less ridiculous. Still, even after I knew what I'd seen, the fear didn't disappear right away. It stayed in my body, buried deep in my chest like something I couldn't shake off. That moment, frozen inside a nylon tent, staring at a shadow I couldn't identify, felt like something primal, something older than logic. And for that moment, my mind had filled in the blanks with the worst thing possible. The rest of the trip went by in a blur. I didn't mention the cow to anyone right away. I just kept to myself, walked around a little during the day, and tried to stay calm. But that moment stayed with me, not because it was a cow, but because I'd learned something about myself that weekend. I'd felt the edge of panic in a way I never had before. I'd stood toe-to-toe with a fear that wasn't real, but it could have been. And the body doesn't care about reason when it's scared. It only knows what it feels. We packed up the next morning and headed home. The car started without a problem. The road looked a little less threatening now, but I still flinched every time we hit a bump. I didn't cry this time, though. I was tired, sure, but I was also calm in a way I hadn't expected. I'd faced the worst parts of my own imagination and come out okay. I didn't need a cigarette anymore. I didn't need to escape. I just needed to keep going. And sometimes it's just a cow. I had taken my family camping up near the San Juan Mountains in Colorado, deep into the woods where the trees thinned out just enough to let some stars show through but still held that close, wild feeling that makes you know you're really out there. We had driven in a few miles off the nearest forest road, parked the truck where the trail stopped, and hiked in with all our gear. It wasn't a marked campground, just a spot I had found years ago during a solo backpacking trip. Quiet, untouched, and not a soul for miles. It had taken most of the afternoon to set everything up. 2 tents, a fire ring, tarps over the gear in case the weather turned. My wife and the kids were all excited. We'd brought simple food, hot dogs, baked beans, trail mix, and by the time the sun dropped behind the trees, we had a decent fire going. The kids ran around catching bugs and tossing pine cones while we sat and watched the flames work their way through the wood. By around 10, everyone was winding down. The kids were yawning, and my wife wanted to tuck them in. The tents were already set up not far from the fire ring, and the air had started to cool. I walked them over, zipped them in, and told them I'd be up for a while. I just wanted to enjoy the quiet for a bit. I don't get a lot of that back home. Work, chores, kids bouncing off the walls. This was different. The woods have a kind of silence that's not really silent. It's filled with tiny sounds like branches creaking, insects clicking, maybe an owl way off in the dark. But it's the kind of noise that settles your nerves instead of winding them up. I pulled out a camp chair and cracked a beer. My dog, a big black lab named Gunner, laid down next to me, his head on his front paws. He's always good on trips like this, alert but calm. Doesn't chase after every little thing. But when he reacts, I listen. I had my feet stretched out toward the fire, just watching the flames dance and feeling the night cool off even more. Maybe 20 minutes passed like that. I was finishing the last few sips of the beer, thinking about grabbing another, when Gunner lifted his head. He sniffed once, short and fast, and then let out a low growl. His ears went stiff and he stood up, shoulders tight. He wasn't barking or losing it, just locked in, facing into the dark beyond the firelight. I didn't hear anything right away. I put the can down and sat forward, trying to see what he was looking at, but the trees were a solid black wall. The fire only lit a small circle around us, and beyond that it was just shadows and outlines. I stood up, reached into the gear bin by the chair, and grabbed my flashlight. It was a strong one, big, heavy, metal casing with a powerful beam. I swept the light in the direction Gunner was facing, across the trees, up along the brush and back. At first I saw nothing, just dark trunks and undergrowth. Then I caught the glint of something. A quick flash of eyeshine, greenish gold and low to the ground. My heart picked up a little. I froze, light locked on that spot. Whatever it was didn't move. I stepped forward slowly, maybe just 5 feet, trying to get a better angle, and that's when I saw it clearly. A mountain lion, lying low, barely visible in the brush about 100 yards out, maybe less. Long, lean body, ears flat. Its eyes were locked right onto me, and I realized how still it was, like a statue, muscles coiled under its hide. For a second, I didn't move. I just stood there holding the flashlight, feeling the weight of the air around me change. Not panic exactly, but that sudden shift when you realize you're not at the top of the food chain out here. Gunner was still growling, now low and steady, like a motor running. I slowly backed up toward the chair, still keeping the light on the lion. I didn't shout or wave, just kept my movements slow, careful. The big cat stayed put, eyes locked on me, and I kept thinking about the firelight, how it didn't reach very far. That thing had probably been watching for a while. Could have been there before Gunner even noticed. Could have been closer earlier. I sat down again, keeping the light trained toward the brush, but the cat didn't move. After maybe another minute, it stood up slowly, long legs, silent, graceful, and padded backward into the shadows, then turned and disappeared into the trees. No sound at all. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. I didn't relax, couldn't. I stayed by the fire for another hour at least, flashlight across my lap, another log on the fire, Gunner still alert but no longer growling. I kept turning my head, scanning the edges of the clearing. Every sound, twig snapping, breeze rustling branches, felt louder now. I couldn't see anything else, but that didn't mean it was gone. Mountain lions can circle, stay just out of view, wait for hours if they want. Eventually, I went over to the tents and unzipped mine just enough to reach in and grab my backpack. I brought it back to the fire, pulled out my knife and the small hatchet I usually use for firewood, and kept them close. Not much use against a mountain lion, but better than nothing. I sat there until the fire started burning low, tossing on wood every so often, but I never saw the eyes again. When the fire was nearly out, I finally got up, stretched my legs, and walked in a slow circle around the camp. No signs of anything, but it was hard to see much in the dark anyway. I kept the flashlight moving, scanning the trees and brush. Gunner stuck close, nose down, but didn't growl again. I figured the cat had moved on, maybe lost interest, but I couldn't be sure. I went into the tent around 3, still fully dressed, boots on, flashlight within reach. Gunnar laid by the door. I didn't sleep much. Every creak and snap outside pulled me halfway awake. I lay there listening, breathing slow, trying not to let my imagination fill in the silence. At some point, I dozed off. When I woke up, it was light, just barely, and the woods were quiet in that early morning way, like the world was holding its breath. We packed up camp that morning like usual, but the whole time I felt a kind of tightness in my chest. That mountain lion had been there, watching, waiting maybe. I kept thinking back. How many other nights had we camped and sat by a fire, laughing, cooking, the kids running around, while something like that might have been just out of sight, watching from the trees, not making a sound. It made me think hard about all those quiet nights I'd spent in the woods. The times I felt like I was completely alone. Maybe I never really was. I started looking at the tree line differently after that. Started noticing how many paths led into the undergrowth. How many sets of tracks I used to ignore or brush off as deer or raccoons. I've hunted before, and I know how quiet a predator can be when it wants to be. We got home fine. Everyone thought it was just another good camping trip. The kids had fun, my wife was happy, and I didn't say much. I didn't want to worry them, and nothing had actually happened. But something in me had shifted. I started carrying bear spray and a fixed-blade knife on my belt, even when I was just sitting by the fire. I started checking the perimeter more often after dark. Not because I was afraid exactly, just because I understood better now. That mountain lion never came closer, as far as I know. Could've, easily. I read later that they stalk their prey, sometimes for hours, that they'll watch hikers or campers for a long time before deciding whether or not to act. They usually don't, but when they do, there's almost no warning. It's over before you even know they're there. I don't think I'll ever forget the way those eyes looked in the flashlight beam. Still, focused, measuring, like it was making a decision. And that's what stays with me most. Not the fear exactly, not even the danger, but the knowledge that I didn't see it until it wanted me to. That I probably never see most of what's out there in the dark. And maybe I'm not supposed to. It was one of those nights where the air feels just a little too thick, like it's waiting for something to happen. The fire crackled low, a few embers dancing in the cool night breeze. My wife, Susan, and I had driven out to a remote campsite, something we hadn't done in years. We were out of the city, away from the noise, deep in the woods where the stars feel close enough to touch. It had been a long week, and honestly, I was looking forward to doing nothing but kicking back, drinking a beer, and maybe tossing the ball for our dog a few times. The kids were tucked into the tent, their laughter fading as they drifted off to sleep. It was quiet now, almost eerily quiet, save for the occasional snap of a branch or the distant rustling of leaves. Gunnar, our golden retriever, was lounging by the fire, his fur glowing in the orange light. The old guy wasn't as spry as he used to be, but he still loved playing fetch, even if it was mostly a slow jog for him these days. I cracked open a beer, the cold a welcome feeling in my hand. The warmth of the fire mixed with the crisp night air, making everything feel like it was just right. Susan, sitting on the other side of the fire pit, smiled at me, her face softly illuminated by the flames. She was sipping on a glass of wine, always the classy one between the two of us. "So, you ready to throw the ball for Gunnar one last time?" she asked, looking over at the dog. I grinned, a little too much alcohol in my system making my voice a bit slurred. "Sure, but no tricks this time. He's been pulling those weird stunts lately." I tossed the ball into the air lightly, not really expecting Gunnar to chase after it. But to my surprise, he perked up, his ears twitching as he stood, then took a few quick, lazy steps toward the ball. It was the typical behavior of a dog in his senior years, moving slower but still excited. I didn't think much of it, just chuckling to myself as I raised my beer for a sip. "Come on, Gunnar, fetch," I said, tossing the ball a little farther into the dark, beyond the reach of the firelight. Gunnar stared at it for a moment, his head tilting slightly. Normally, he would have bolted after the ball, but tonight, there was something different in his eyes. He didn't move for a good few seconds, and I started to wonder if the old guy was finally done with playing fetch for good. That's when it happened. With a quick, sharp movement, Gunnar darted off into the night. Faster than I'd seen him move in months. "Hey, where's he going?" Susan asked, sitting up a little straighter, her tone suddenly tense. "Probably just after the ball," I said with a wave of my hand, but there was a knot in my stomach now. That wasn't like Gunnar. I stood up, squinting into the dark, trying to catch a glimpse of him. The firelight didn't reach far, and beyond it, the trees loomed thick and dense. I could just make out Gunnar's shape moving through the underbrush, his tail barely visible in the low light. "I'll go check on him," I muttered, suddenly feeling a bit uneasy. I walked towards the trees, calling his name. "Gunnar, come on. Buddy, where are you?" Nothing. The only sounds were the occasional rustling of the leaves and the crackle of the fire behind me. I walked deeper into the woods, still calling his name, but all that answered me was silence. That wasn't right. I'd been camping enough to know that when your dog goes off like that, without a second thought into the deep woods, it's not normal. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Something felt off. I kept walking, moving deeper into the trees, my heart beating faster with each step. The further I went, the more the night seemed to close in around me. The wind had died down, and the usual hum of insects had gone quiet. Everything felt still, too still. "Gunnar!" I shouted, my voice breaking through the quiet. But again, nothing. No sound of paws hitting the dirt, no rustling in the brush. Just that oppressive silence, pressing in from all sides. I stopped, realizing I had gone too far. I turned back, about to retrace my steps, when I saw a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye. Gunnar's shape low to the ground, moving quickly through the trees. "Gunnar!" I shouted, relieved at first, but then I froze. Something wasn't right. The way he was moving, it was almost too smooth, too deliberate. The old dog couldn't move that fast anymore, let alone with such grace. I took a step toward him, but he immediately darted behind a thick clump of trees. My stomach dropped. "Gunnar, come on. Stop messing around," I called, my voice more urgent now. I was about to take another step when I heard it. A low growl. Not from Gunnar, but from the shadows, deeper in the woods. I froze. My heart slammed in my chest. That wasn't a dog. I took a few steps back, suddenly aware of how far I had gone into the trees. The growl sounded again, closer now, almost a rumble in the ground. It sent a chill down my spine, my instincts screaming at me to run back to the camp. That's when Gunnar appeared again. But this time he wasn't running. He was walking slowly, and his eyes were fixed on me. Not in a friendly, wag-your-tail kind of way. No, his gaze was cold, calculating, like he didn't even recognize me. My head spun. The dog I knew, the one who always followed me, the one who had been with us for years, wasn't the dog walking toward me now. And then it clicked. The growl came again, and I saw something move in the shadows behind Gunnar. A flash of eyeshine. Not the bright, friendly eyes of my dog, but something much larger, more predatory. My stomach turned, and I felt a knot tighten in my chest. It wasn't Gunnar. At that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. Something bigger than me, something that had been silently watching, had been moving through the trees the whole time. It was just waiting for the right moment. I turned and bolted, running back toward the fire, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Gunnar, no, whatever it was, stayed behind, not chasing, but I could still hear it moving in the dark. I didn't look back. When I reached the campsite, Susan was standing by the fire, her eyes wide, scanning the trees. "What's going on? What happened?" I gasped, trying to catch my breath, but my words caught in my throat. I could barely even speak. "Get in the tent. Now." I grabbed the flashlight from the ground and shone it around the campsite, hoping to spot something, anything, but the night was still, too still. My mind raced, but I couldn't make sense of anything. I rushed over to the tent, zipped it up quickly behind us, and started grabbing whatever we needed. "We're leaving. Now." Susan looked at me, confused. "What? Why?" "Don't ask questions. Just grab the kids and get in the truck." We didn't talk as I packed everything up, the fear gnawing at my insides. I didn't need to explain. The air felt wrong, like something was watching, waiting for the moment when we'd be too vulnerable. We managed to get everything in the truck, the kids still half asleep, confused about why we were leaving. I didn't tell them, didn't want to scare them any more than I had to. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I had seen, that thing with Gunnar, it was still out there, waiting. As we pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something watching from the trees. But there was nothing, just the road behind us, dark and empty. I didn't sleep that night. Even once we got home, the feeling didn't leave. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Gunnar's eyes. Not the friendly, loyal eyes I had known for years, but something else, something cold and predatory. I don't know if it was the lion or something else in the woods, but whatever it was, I'll never forget it, and I'll never trust the woods the same way again. I've always been the type to take my camping seriously. I'm not the guy who shows up unprepared and hopes for the best. Every time I pack my gear, I double-check. My tent? Packed. Sleeping bag? Ready. First aid kit? You bet. But on this trip, there was something new I decided to add to my pack. Something that, on paper, might seem a bit strange. Chuck Norris. You might be wondering, what the hell does Chuck Norris have to do with camping? Well, let me explain. Out here, in the deep woods, you never know what you're gonna run into. Not every situation is straightforward. And sometimes, what you need isn't just a good knife or a bear spray. Sometimes you need something more. Something legendary. I've heard the jokes about Chuck Norris. The guy who can roundhouse kick you into next week. The man who makes the laws of physics bow down to his will. But out here, in the wild, I figured I might need a bit of that legendary toughness on my side. So I packed him. I didn't just throw him in my backpack somewhere deep, though. That would be a rookie mistake. No, I made sure Chuck was right at the top, easily accessible. You never know when you're going to need him. In fact, I holstered Chuck right at the front of my backpack, making sure the handle was within easy reach. I could already hear the jokes in my head. Chuck Norris in your backpack? What are you, a tourist? But I wasn't concerned with what anyone thought. I'd done enough solo camping trips in my life to know that in the wilderness, you're on your own. So I'd make sure I had every edge I could get. I made my way up into the mountains, the familiar crunch of my boots on the gravel and dirt grounding me. The weather was perfect, clear skies, a slight breeze, and the temperature just right. I was ready for a weekend of peace and quiet. No cell service, no distractions. Just me, the trees, the stars, and Chuck Norris if things went south. The hike up to the campsite was familiar to me. It wasn't particularly challenging, but it wasn't a walk in the park either. It took a couple of hours, and by the time I reached the spot I'd chosen, I was ready to drop my pack and set up camp. I made a little fire pit, set up my tent, and started to gather some firewood. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, and the temperature was starting to drop. It was the kind of night that made you feel small, surrounded by the towering trees and the deep, endless woods. I wasn't afraid, but I was always aware of the fact that I was just one small person in a vast, untamed world. After a while, I had my camp set up. I started the fire and unpacked my gear. Sitting on a log, I cracked open a beer, taking a long pull. The fire crackled and popped, sending small sparks into the night. I felt at ease, letting the peace of the wilderness wash over me. Gunshots were a distant memory now, and for the next couple of days, it would be nothing but this. But something felt off. Maybe it was the sound of movement in the woods around me, the rustling of leaves that seemed just a little too loud, or the way the shadows seemed to stretch a little too far in the dim light. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I shook it off. I wasn't a rookie, and I knew how the forest worked. It wasn't like I was being hunted. I wasn't in a jungle after all. But then again, the wilds have a way of making you question everything. The sounds of the forest continued around me. Rustling trees, the crackle of the fire, the occasional bird call. But there was something lurking beneath the surface. Something in the way the night felt. I leaned back on my pack, keeping one hand near the front where Chuck was holstered. I didn't want to be overly paranoid, but you never know. The sun had set completely now, and the shadows were long. I could barely make out the edges of the trees around me. The only light was from my campfire, flickering in the dark. That's when I heard it. A snap. It was quiet, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable, like the sound of a twig breaking underfoot. It came from somewhere in the distance, but still close enough that my heart skipped a beat. I froze. I had been in enough remote places to know that sounds like that, sounds of something moving where there shouldn't be, could mean trouble. Could be a deer, sure, or a smaller animal, but in these woods, it could be something far more dangerous. Mountain lions were known to roam these parts, and they weren't anything to take lightly. I slowly, almost instinctively, reached down to my waist, making sure that Chuck was still there, secure in the holster I'd attached to the front of my pack. I felt the cold steel of the handle and the comforting weight. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I didn't want to find out the hard way. I grabbed the flashlight, clicked it on, and shone it in the direction of the sound. Nothing, just trees. I exhaled, more relieved than I realized. The silence felt heavier now, as if the whole forest was holding its breath with me. Then, another sound, closer this time, the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the underbrush. A slow, deliberate step. I turned the flashlight toward it. Nothing, just shadows. I stood up, walking slowly toward the edge of my camp, the flashlight beam bouncing off the trunks of the trees. My heartbeat quickened, and I could feel the tension in the air. My mind was running through every possible scenario. A deer? A bear? A mountain lion? Then it happened again, a growl. It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough. And it was close. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed Chuck from its holster and made sure the safety was on, just like I'd been trained to do. I checked the handle again, feeling the cold metal in my grip. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but I needed to be ready. The growl came again, this time louder, a deep, throaty sound that sent a shiver down my spine. I quickly spun around, shining the flashlight through the trees. There, in the distance, a pair of glowing eyes reflected back at me. My heart stopped. It was a mountain lion. The beast was standing still, its body partially hidden in the trees, but I could make out the shape of its powerful legs, its long tail swishing slightly. The eyes were locked on me, predatory and calculating. I took a slow, steadying breath. This was it. I had to think fast. I didn't know if this lion was just curious or if it was getting ready to pounce. But either way, I wasn't sticking around to find out. I took a step back, moving slowly, deliberately, making sure not to turn my back on it. Then, in the distance, I heard the crackle of twigs. Another movement. It was too much. I backed away quickly, heading toward the tent, not looking away from the lion for even a second. The flashlight in my hand was shaking slightly, but I kept it focused on the glowing eyes. The lion didn't move. I kept backing up, closer to the tent, closer to the safety of my gear. I kept my hand on Chuck, ready if things got worse. But slowly, the eyes disappeared. The lion was gone. It had retreated into the darkness. I stood there for a long while, my breath heavy in my chest, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It had been close, too close. Finally, I turned and made my way back to the fire, sitting down heavily on the log. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. The night seemed a little quieter now, but my mind was still buzzing. I checked Chuck one more time, made sure the safety was on, and took a long drink from my beer. The adrenaline was wearing off, but the tension in the air remained. I don't know how long I sat there, staring into the fire, but eventually, the sounds of the forest seemed to settle again. The growls, the eyes, everything disappeared into the night. The only thing left was the crackle of the fire and the slow, steady beat of my heart. The night passed without further incident, and as the morning light began to break through the trees, I realized how lucky I had been. I'd had Chuck Norris in the right place at the right time, and I'd made it through without incident. But from then on, I never forgot one thing. Always make sure your Chuck Norris is easily accessible, and never underestimate the wild.